Good morning, Analia.
Morning, John. How are you?
I'm good. There I am. I was having a hard time appearing, but I'm here now. It's great to have you with us on Marketing Connected Live. It's wonderful. I think the topic that we're talking about today is really of interest to a large amount of marketers right now. As we talk about the whole business of transformation and the ability to use agile approaches to achieve that. But I wanted to always start with my guests, and I wanted to start a little bit with you. I know that you spent a few years at Rogers. Can you take us through your career path and how you got to the position you are in today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am maybe a bit of a dinosaur. At Rogers, I've been here 18 years. I actually started in frontline. I was an executive assistant at one point. It's a story of growth. And then, from product management development to base marketing, analytics, acquisition marketing on more than one of the Rogers brands.
Right.
Always on the wireless side, and then more recently, lead of the Agile Marketing COE in the last 18 months.
Well, that's just terrific. And by the way, I'm a dinosaur compared to you. I spent 33 years at a total of 2 companies. And so I know that there's all sorts of good things that come from that because you really understand the company and the context that you're working within. And you've been very successful. So congratulations for that. Today's topic is on agile marketing. And I know that you wrote a great blog and it's available on our website. But let me just start asking the question, what is the difference between agile marketing and agile development? Are they the same or different?
They're rooted on the same principles for sure, and those are part of the blog, and being test-driven, customer-driven, fast, etc. Where they're mainly different is the composition of the team that's working. It's a very business-centric team, of course, versus a technically heavy team. But also what we're working on is unlocking the performance of a particular KPI and iterating to drive that using the principles as opposed to building a functionality, a feature, a technology outcome. And then, you're done, you move on to the next task. That's how they're different. Right.
One is a technology outcome, one is a business outcome, but some of the features of that process are the same. And we'll get into a little bit more of that as we proceed this morning. What in your experience led you to the conclusion that you needed to set your marketing functions up differently? Was it something that came to you, like in the moment? Or something that you realized over time because you had some certain challenges?
It's a great question. And it's like in everything in Agile, it's a journey, right? The reason why we started to dig into this wasn't about Agile marketing. It was about how do we get more outcomes digitally? What will it take? Some things we're really good at, some things we're not really good at. And as we started to peel that onion, we started to ask to those that had done really good results in a short period of time, all roads led to agile marketing. And it's like, well, what is that? Like, how does it work? We do that already. But, well, no, you do agile development. This is what this means. And as we started to peel the onion, we realized things we're not really good at. Like, how do you get, closer to the customer, especially when, technical adoption of platforms is so fast, right? Take what it took radio to get 50 million users, 38 years versus TV, 10 or 13, and Instagram 1.5 years. And so when you take things like that, it's like, how do you accelerate the pace of which you're closer? We're not fast enough. Usually things take 3 months to 18 months, depending on what it is. And, there's always the tension of you're spending too much in marketing, your marketing organization is too big. Like those things end up being benefits or outcomes of agile marketing. So it was one small thing that led to hey, we should probably try this. Now, how you unlock that journey is key. You don't just do it all, but multiple reasons, I would say.
Right. Thank you. I'm interested in the change from within. So I know that within a large organizational context, change can be challenging, particularly when you may not have someone within the organization to turn to for advice. Where did you go for good advice so that you set up these new processes in the best way possible?
Honestly, it's not only you don't have the capability within. There's not many that have blazed the trail, if you will. So you have to find others that have done it, and you have to look globally. That's what we did. And so as we found some, and we built a community of sharing, others came along. We built connections with those that had done it in other markets and other industries across the globe. And then we started to hire practitioners. And with, as engaged as we were, trying to customize what we learned to our context. We did a lot of customization to our context, and that was key. But you have to find others that have done it and learn from them. That's what we did.
That's great. And I think that just that, I guess it takes a little bit of, kind of bravery to go out and ask people and say, that we want to learn from you. Let's share ideas, but always best practice. And almost all the time, you'll find people that really want to share their success, their story, like you're doing today. So I think that's tremendous. Okay, so let's get into the actual blog advice. And you did come up with 5 principles, which I thought were great. The first one is be test driven, control groups and offers and all that stuff. You mentioned in the blog that you need to focus on analysis versus opinion. Can you explain that?
Yeah, of course. It's not uncommon, particularly in large matrix organizations, number one, to be swooped by leadership on what they perhaps believe is the better answer for this problem, and to make that part of, your solution. Also, it's not uncommon to use a lot of hindsight data to answer your current business problems. And usually because these decisions, there's rigid approval processes, you pack big decisions into one, and there's too much risk to not involve everybody, to not take a long time, and to not use their buy-in and thought. So what Agile does, and the framework, is break these decisions into small, bearable chunks where the risk is not big, and you can measure and then learn. I'll tell you one thing we learned is that the leadership ideas did not have a higher success rate than the team's ideas.
Wow.
And in the beginning, they're 50-50. Of course, as the team learns, their higher success rate. But if they're 50-50, then there's no better idea, no matter if you're the highest paid person in the room or not. And that gives credibility to the team. But you have to build to that. You don't get it right away. It's a journey.
No, that's great. I think that's really fits in well with the times that we're in, where the facts are important, and the the analysis is very important, and not making assumptions. I think that's tremendous. The second advice you have is to take a customer-centric approach. When I read that, I said, like, what's the alternative? But where is sometimes the bias if you don't kind of focus on that?
It sounds very vanilla when we say take a customer-centric approach. Of course, we take customer-centric approach. In big matrix organizations, we all have customer experience centers and principles that we abide in. And you do this at the global level very, very well. But to do it at the micro level, and each tactic, at each marketing campaign, at each tactic, it becomes incredibly difficult to do it end to end well. And so this is where Agile Marketing, the framework, allows you to be better at that. We have found we have gone to things that we never usually do because there's not enough time. That improves the rep experience, the customer experience. The bias when you start at the tactical KPI level for a middle manager could be to start with the KPI and not think through every piece that brought the customer to that interaction. But again, I'm talking about more tactical level strategies.
Right. No, that's tremendous. And I know that, marketing really is, underneath marketing is the science of psychology. So, you really ought to understand the customer all the time and have that in the forefront of all your development. The next piece of advice is be fast and fail fast. Now, I don't think anyone loves failure, and I never aimed for failure, but explain to me how being fast and failing fast kind of works together. Help me out here a little.
Failure is mandatory and you have to embrace it. And it was hard. It was hard for all of us.
Yeah.
Even hey, we're 80% ready, not 95. Yes, 20% of this, we got it wrong, and that's okay. The manifesto reads that we embrace failure as a learning opportunity, but we don't fail the same way twice. Yeah. And so that's important, right? And so be fast and fail fast is if it's small chunks that you can absorb the risk, you can accelerate, you can learn from it and take that to your next thing. And if it was successful, you scale it. If it's not successful, then you rethink it. Where we built the courage for failure in our conversations, it was every step of the way, spotlighting failure as a learning opportunity. It was hard to talk about it in the beginning, but more and more it's celebrated, but we're still young in the journey. Yeah.
Yeah. And did you find that people were sometimes unwilling to accept the failure, or did they, what were some of the fears? What were some of the issues they had on the notion of, that didn't work, let's switch horses? Were they still committed to the old way, or can you explain that a little bit more?
Actually, what was cathartic, if it's the right word, I think, it's oh my God, we always thought this was the way to do it. We didn't think about these three things. What a great learning. So how are you going to do it differently? And so it was a lot of the historical things that we thought we would work. And then we also, some things were validated. I think it was breaking it up that way and reminding people that it's low risk. But it was hard, of course, but I mean, it was bringing folks along, I think, was the biggest thing.
Yeah, and I love what you just said about being low risk. You don't want to fail on the most important thing that has huge investment ahead of it. So that's why you want to be fast and get at the failure early, and then make adjustments and move on, as opposed to bet the farm on some particular thing. That's really great. Thank you for explaining that to me a little bit better than I understood. Okay, your next piece of advice is to be collaborative and avoid hierarchy. So you had mentioned to me another time when we chatted that you kind of sit halfway through Roger's hierarchy. What's important about managing through all that, up, down, sideways?
Okay, so I think two questions in one is, when we talk about avoiding hierarchy, we talk about hierarchical behaviors.
Right.
So I am the senior director of, so I have the answer to this. That it's really about what we call servant leadership and how to enable. So, how do I talk a lot less and enable a lot more? It's that. In terms of, driving the transformation and how do we manage up to ensure that our leadership feels comfortable? I think it comes down to transparency to build the credibility. And the role that empowerment plays. What does empowerment feel like for the person empowering, and what does what does it look like for the person being empowered? And it's not you do whatever you want, it's you say what you do and you do what you say, right? And so teaching ourselves that and reminding ourselves was a journey. Like you'll see if I can just expand, you'll see that the narrative for any transformation like this is those that failed focus too much on the what you do in agile marketing. Those that have succeeded, we learned that you focus as much on the how your leadership interacts with the squads, how you enable them, how you transform their leadership journey, and the what. And I've never done more high trust sessions than in the last 18 months than the last 18 years.
That's wonderful. It sounds very rewarding on a personal level as well. There's a question that's come in, and they're always interesting. The question that came in is, what is the typical agile marketing team set up in terms of roles, numbers of team members, etc.? So you may not know typical, but you know what you're kind of dealing with. So maybe you could answer from that perspective.
Actually, typical is you adapt it to the mission statement, right? So if it's something that you need to drive more digital outcomes, you might have more digitally savvy people in terms of UX, UI, and things like that. If it's more about margin optimization, then you might have folks that understand a little bit more on that front. But typically you would have what we call business owner, which is the leader of the squad. Of course, you want a practitioner, a scrum master. And then you might have a marketeer, you might have a campaigns performance person, analytics. If you have channels, you have retail versus digital versus, you might staff some of those, again, depending on the mission statement of your squad.
That's great. A related question also came in, and it's asking about, within the Rogers marketing environment, is this how everything works, or is only certain things work? And can you kind of explain a little bit about that?
I would say right now, certain things, we're still very much transforming. But yeah, not everywhere for sure. The key here is to start small. Like if 18 months ago, where did we start? We started with a couple of pilots in an area of the business that you're like, oh, it'd be great if it improves, but listen, it's low risk if it doesn't. And it sort of, you have to continuously every 6 months change, expand, add something to it, and as you go. So these kinds of transformations take years. So not everything, no.
I'll ask one more. The questions are coming in fast and furious, so you're doing a great job to interest the participants. Did you hire people with Agile experience, or did you develop that from within?
That's something we learned, which is, and talking to other practitioners that had other, people like myself that had done this in other industries, was you need the internal know-how. But you also need practitioners. And even when those practitioners, like Agile coaches or Agile transformation leaders, when they come in, they're like, oh, I haven't seen it done this way. Why? And as you start to sort of bring those ideas together, it is evident that maybe it needs even a further change. But what we did, mix practitioners with motivated individuals. If it's internal, if it's all internal people, your old mindsets will creep in. You got to watch out for that. And if it's people that is outside, big matrix organizations like ourselves or the banks or other, like, there's too much complexity. They'll never even get the credibility to move things forward. Really
well answered. Thank you for that. The last piece of advice that you are suggesting is to be efficient. And to me, a lot of efficiency has to do with avoiding approvals. And I think that's what your blog talked about as well. Can you talk a little bit more about this? I mean, I used to call it stakeholder analysis when I was doing some work. Like, how do approvals work in Agile marketing? I assume you still need some.
Yeah, so I don't remember the exact wording in the blog, but for sure it's not about avoiding approvals. It's about, the leadership support is about setting the vision. What do we need to get to? And then it's like, what are the guardrails you need today? Whether it's, budget, ability to certain offers, people, whatever that is. Here are the things you can have to do that. These are the guardrails. You can't get out of these guardrails. And go. How you get there, the squad decides through test and learn and iterative approaches. Where you become efficient is you eliminate the passing of the baton between teams. Like me as a marketer now, I have to send it to the person that does Marcom, that has to send it to the agency that then needs to bring it to legal. All those people are there. There's guardrails, right? Legal has, here are the guardrails. You can approve it yourself. Here are the guardrails. And so we call it sandboxes. That takes time. That's why you start small, because quite frankly, I wouldn't know how to set a sandbox for legal or a sandbox for finance. It is, as people engage, you build it over time. You will make mistakes. So we had very little sandboxes in the beginning, and they come, and I would say the last thing is, the efficiency. There's other efficiencies that are unlocked later, which is, as teams are empowered and they have sandboxes, you do need less people managing people. So there's a layer of efficiency with people as well.
And I wonder whether this Agile methodology that you're recommending gets away from people maybe trying to be the generalist or trying to have opinions in areas where they're not really required to, but they think they have a specific degree of competency there. Is that the case, or did you not?
I smile because what you need is a lot more specialists that can bridge beyond, we call them T-shaped employees, that can bridge beyond the area of competency, which takes a certain type of individual. But you start with specialists, and the environment makes ordinary people extraordinary.
Right.
And it really sort of brings things, I've watched these ideation sessions where it's like, oh, wow, that was a great idea, from the guy that pulls the data for the targeting criteria. It's like the marketer didn't come up with that. And the environment just really, if you're invested in it,
Right.
if you become hierarchical in it, you're not going to get that out of it.
Good. No, that's really good. I think I want to come and work for you. Maybe are you hiring? Maybe. So I guess like transformation, I've been through it myself. It requires a degree of perseverance. Can you remember back to a time in your process? Has it all been, sugar dust and fairy dust, or there been times where you've been frustrated with, this sense of how's, the challenges that you had to kind of address as you went through it?
I was always frustrated. But there's permanently frustrated. But jokes aside, there's change management can be a lonely journey. One of my leaders told me that once, and he wasn't wrong. It can be. And what it did for my leadership journey was I needed to take the courage it's not about my spotlight. It's not about my name being recognized. It's about, you sit in a meeting and suddenly there's a stakeholder that is just entirely against this. There's a bit of misinformation, not leaning in, and then you spend 3 sessions with this team, 3 sessions creating high trust sessions, you develop materials, and suddenly you're in a next huddle a month later, and this person is speaking from within about how much these are the things we need to do, and as if her own idea. And when you sit there, you almost have to, okay, this is an accomplishment that is invisible, but it's a huge accomplishment. So that's the way it goes. But I think I 10 years ago, I didn't have the maturity or the courage to pull through something like this. Right. At this point in my career, it's actually, I loved it. It was great, but it's a constant, pressure, tension that you have to, pull through it constantly.
Yeah, it almost feels athletic to a degree, like you're in the ring or whatever environment you can connect with athleticism. But I think that's tremendous. The last question I wanted to end with today is on measurement. So earlier you mentioned, it's important not to kind of define your KPIs too early in the process, but how do you define success differently within agile processes?
Well, even to step further, you do establish the most important step in building your squads in your transformation is what is the scope and the KPIs you're going to be measured by. That we get leadership alignment straight up front. The way we measure is, I would say what's changed is, of course, a lot of us marketers, some of us even measure performance by the minute, or by the hour, or by the day, and the month, and the week. What's changed is that we don't measure only the what anymore.
Right.
We measure the how.
Right.
And what I mean by the how is, how are we working together? What did we do well? Where do we need to excel? And that happens for those that are familiar with Agile every 2 weeks. And we use Scrum framework. And every 2 weeks we talk about, well, Analia, you leaned in too much here. You should have leaned in here. Right. This is what we should do as a team next time to help. And that happens every 2 weeks. In some of these large organizations, employee surveys have happened twice a year. Imagine taking a pulse of your employee satisfaction every 2 weeks and building a plan against it, and then re-looking at it. To me, that's really giving your employees a voice.
That's great. No, I think that's great. And that's great. I think that's all we have for today. Really, really enjoyed the conversation, Analia. Thank you for coming on and sharing your tremendous experience with all of us here today. And I wish you all the best for the future in your continual transformation within Rogers. Thanks a lot for your time today, Analia.
Thank you, John. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.